Hello, I'm Achut Nair from Nair's Aviation Ground School. This is the 45th video in a new series of educational and informative aviation videos for the aspiring pilot. The most important aspect of any flight is the pilot. Without the pilot's skill and knowledge, the aircraft would not even make it onto the runway. Aviation is wholly dependent on the men and women who work so hard to make it to the cockpits of the aircraft around the world. This video is about human factors. The term human factors has grown increasingly popular as commercial aviation industry realizes that human error rather than mechanical failure underlies most aviation accidents and incidents. The usual factors that cause accidents and create dangerous situations are often called the dirty dozen. We will go over the 12 major factors that affect pilots and their performance in the cockpit. The first aspect is the lack of communication. Poor communication often appears at the top of contributing and causal factors in accident reports and is therefore one of the most critical human factor elements. Communication refers to the transmitter and the receiver, as well as the method of transmission. Transmitted instructions may be unclear or inaccessible. The receiver may make assumptions about the meaning of these instructions, and the transmitter may assume that the message has been received and understood. With verbal communication, it is common that only 30% of a message is received and understood. In order to mitigate a lack of communication, verbal messages should be kept short, with the most critical elements emphasized at the beginning and repeated at the end. Assumptions should be avoided, and opportunities for asking questions both given and taken. A second factor is complacency. Complacency can be described as a feeling of self-satisfaction accompanied by a loss of awareness of potential dangers. Such a feeling often arises when conducting routine activities that have become habitual and which may be considered by an individual as easy and safe. A general relaxation of vigilance results and important signals will be missed, with the individual only seeing what he or she expects to see. Complacency can also occur following a highly intense activity, such as recovering from a possible emergency. The relief felt at the time can result in physical relaxation and reduced mental vigilance and awareness. This particular psychological experience is referred to as lacuna. Whilst too much pressure and demand causes overstress and reduced human performance, too little results in understress, boredom, complacency, and reduced human performance. It is therefore important, when conducting simple, routine, and habitual tasks, and when fatigued, to maintain an adequate or optimum level of stress through different stimulation. Always expect a fault. It is important to avoid working from memory, assuming that something is okay when you haven't checked it. Teamwork and mutual cross-checking will provide adequate stimulus when fatigued. A lack of knowledge is another factor. The regulatory requirements for training and qualification can be comprehensive, and organizations are forced to strictly enforce these requirements. However, lack of on-the-job experience and specific knowledge can lead pilots into misjudging situations and making unsafe decisions. Aircraft systems are so complex and integrated that it is nearly impossible to perform many tasks without substantial technical training, current relevant experience, and adequate reference documents. Furthermore, systems and procedures can change substantially, and employees' knowledge can quickly become out of date. It is important for pilots to undertake continuing professional development, and for the most experienced pilots to share their knowledge with their colleagues. Part of this learning process should include the latest knowledge on human error and performance. It should not be taken as a sign of weakness to ask someone for help or for information. In fact, this should be encouraged. Checklists and publications should always be referred to and followed, and never make assumptions or work from purely memory. Another important human factor is distraction. Distractions could be anything that draws a person's attention away from the task on which they are employed. Such distractions in the workplace are unavoidable, such as loud noises, requests for assistance, and the day to day safety problems one encounters in the cockpit. Other distractions can be avoided or delayed until more appropriate times, such as messages from home and management decisions concerning non immediate work and social conversations. Psychologists say that distraction is the number one cause of forgetting things, hence, the need to avoid becoming distracted and to avoid distracting others. Humans tend to think ahead. Thus, when returning to a task following a distraction, we have a tendency to think we are already further ahead than we actually are. Another important human factor is the lack of teamwork. In aviation, many tasks and operations are team affairs. No single person can be responsible for the safe outcome of all tasks, despite being pilot in command. However, if someone is not contributing to the team effort, such as a co-pilot not helping the captain, this can lead to unsafe outcomes. This means that pilots must rely on colleagues and other outside agencies, as well as give their support to others. Teamwork consists of many skills that each team member will need to prove their competence. Some key teamwork skills include leadership, followership, effective communication, trust building, motivation of self and others, and praise giving. A major human factor is fatigue. Fatigue is a natural physiological reaction to prolonged physical or mental stress. We can become fatigued following long periods of work and also following periods of hard work. When fatigue becomes a chronic condition, it may require medical attention. As we become more fatigued, our ability to concentrate, remember, and make decisions reduces. Therefore, we are more easily distracted and we lose situational awareness. Fatigue will also affect a person's mood, often making them more withdrawn, but sometimes also more irrational and angry. It is a human problem that we tend to overestimate our ability to cope with fatigue and underestimate our actual level of fatigue. Therefore, it is important that pilots are aware of the signs and symptoms of fatigue in themselves and others. Another human factor is a lack of resources. If all the required material are not available to complete a task, then the pilot will be pressured to make do and complete a task without the proper equipment. Regardless of the task, resources also include personnel, time, data, tools, skill, experience, and knowledge. A lack of any of these resources can interfere with one's ability to complete a task. It may also be the case that the resources available, including support, are of a low quality or inadequate for that task. Forward planning is needed to ensure that the pilot has all the resources they need to complete the tasks needed. A major human factor is pressure. Pressure is to be expected when working in a dynamic environment, such as the cockpit of an airplane. However, when the pressure to meet a deadline interferes with our ability to complete tasks correctly, then it has become too much. It is the old argument of quantity versus quality, and in aviation, we should never knowingly reduce the quality of our flying or our work. Pressure can also be created by a lack of resources, especially time, and also from our own inability to cope with a situation. We may come under direct or indirect pressure from the company that we work for, from clients, and even our colleagues. However, one of the most common sources of pressure is ourselves. We put pressure on ourselves by taking on more work than we can handle, especially other people's problems, by trying to save face, and by positively promoting superpowers that we do not possess. These poor judgments are often the result of making assumptions about what is expected of us. Another major human factor is a lack of assertiveness. Being both unable to express our concerns and not allowing others to express their concerns creates ineffective communications and damages teamwork. Unassertive team members can be forced to go along with a majority decision, even when they believe it is wrong and dangerous to do so. Assertiveness is a communication and behavioral style that allows us to express our feelings, opinions, concerns, beliefs, and needs in a positive and productive manner. When we are assertive, we also invite and allow others to assert themselves without feeling threatened, undermined, or that we've lost face. Speaking one's mind assertively is not to be confused with aggression. It is about communicating directly, but honestly and appropriately, giving respect to the opinions and needs of others, but not compromising our own standards. This is especially important in the cockpit. Assertiveness techniques can be learnt, and they focus on keeping calm, being rational, using specific examples rather than generalizations, and inviting feedback. Most importantly, any criticisms should be directed at the actions and consequences rather than people and their personalities. This allows others to maintain their dignity and a productive conclusion to be reached. Stress might be one of the most important human factors. There are many types of stress. Typically, in the aviation environment, there are two distinct types: acute and chronic stress. Acute stress rises from real time demands placed on our senses, mental processing, and physical body, such as dealing with an emergency or working under time pressure with inadequate resources. Chronic stress is accumulated and results from long term demands placed on the physiology by life's demands, such as family relations, finances, illness, bereavement, or divorce, among others. When we suffer stress from these persistent and long term life events, it can mean our threshold of reaction to demands and pressure at work can be lowered. Thus, at work, we may overreact inappropriately, too often, and too easily. The situation of stress arising from lack of stimulation at work has been covered under complacency. Some early visible signs of stress include changes in personality and moods, errors of judgment, lack of concentration, and poor memory. Individuals may notice difficulty in sleeping and an increase in fatigue, as well as digestive problems. Longer term signs of stress include susceptibility to infections, increased use of stimulants and self medication, absence from work, illness, and depression. It is important to recognize the early signs of stress and to determine whether it is acute or chronic. Coping with daily demands of work can be achieved with simple breathing and relaxation techniques. However, perhaps more effective is having channels of communication readily available through which to discuss the issue and help rationalize perceptions. It is entirely appropriate that some of these channels involve social interaction with peers. As with fatigue, sleep, diet, and exercise are all important factors in helping reduce stress and build resilience to stressors. If the stress is chronic, then a definite lifestyle change will be required. A lack of awareness is another human factor that needs to be considered. Working in isolation and only considering one's own responsibilities can lead to tunnel vision, a partial view, and a lack of awareness of the effect our actions can have on others and the wider task itself. Such lack of awareness may also result from other human factors, such as stress, fatigue, pressure, and distraction. Vigilance is closely related to situational awareness, and workplace procedures such as scanning, two-way communication, and use of checklists to help maintain vigilance. Another human factor is norms. Workplace practices develop over time, through experience and often under the influence of a specific workplace culture. These practices can be both good and bad, safe and unsafe. They are referred to as the way we do things around here and become norms. Unfortunately, such practices follow unwritten rules or behaviors, which deviate from the required rules, procedures, and instructions. These norms can then be enforced through peer pressure and force of habit. It is important to understand that most norms have not been designed to meet all circumstances, and therefore are not adequately tested against potential threats. Rules and procedures should have been designed and tested, and therefore ought to be enforced and followed rigorously. Where workers feel pressure to deviate from a procedure or work around it, then this information should be fed back so that the procedure can be reviewed and amended if necessary. Developing assertiveness can allow workers to express their concerns about unsafe norms despite peer pressure. As a pilot, it is important to understand the human factors that can affect one's performance in the air. Flying is a dangerous activity if not done properly, and these human factors can definitely impact one's ability to fly properly. For more information, please contact us at liftanddrag@gmail.com and visit our website at nyersaviation.webnode.com. Also visit our YouTube channel, Nyers Aviation. Thank you. Safe flying.